been a classroom teacher. I taught Spanish both at the middle school, high school, advanced placement, and at the university level. In fact, I started at the university level and then went down, which is kind of not the normal sort of flow. But I've been working with the state seals of biliteracy since 2012. And that sort of is what led me on the pathway that I'm going to talk about and share with you today. I'm in Illinois, and let's see, I'm a grandmother of 8. How's that?
Wow, really?
Yeah, 4 boys, 4 girls.
That's half. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm Krista Liu. I'm the world language specialist at Nebraska Department of Education. And Rebecca Kalin, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Rebecca Spangler. I teach Spanish at Conestoga High School. It's just south of Omaha. I teach Spanish 1, 2, 3, and 4, so I'm the only one at Conestoga. It's my 13th year, my 6th year at Conestoga. I taught at big schools in Iowa before. Let's see what else. I have 2 kids. I like to travel, like to do yoga. That's pretty much it. And I'm excited to learn. I had a student who studied abroad in Spain this last summer. And I think she'd be a really good candidate for this. So I'm excited to learn more about it.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Kellyanne Rosebaugh. I'm a German teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska. I teach levels 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4 in AP if I have kids go that far. Yeah, I am currently between 2 buildings, so I teach at middle school and high school for German. I love to travel. I just took my first group of kids to Germany this summer, which was really exciting.
Yeah. Oh, I love when I travel with students. That was great. It's when they realize that it's not like a pseudo subject, that it actually works in the real world. It changes a lot of minds.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And then they got to see places that we talked about in class, as well as they actually had to use a subway map and learn how to read routes, which they're like, we did this in class. I'm like, yes, we did. Let's try it in real life.
Sure, that's great.
Yeah, Mel, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Mel Hernandez. I am currently serving as the World Language Curriculum Coordinator for Lincoln Public Schools. Before that, I taught at Southwest High School and taught levels 1 through 4 and started the Heritage program over there. And then I was at Northeast High School where I taught the Heritage learners of Spanish and AP Spanish. I too like to travel. I think my family and I have been to different places in Mexico a handful of times the last couple of years. We try to go to a new place every single time just to learn about all the new things. And I've got 2 kids at home that are, I suppose, heritage learners as themselves because we speak Spanish at home, so they understand and are able to read.
Awesome. Thank you.
Terrific. That's great. So I'll go ahead and get started. And if anyone else pops in, we'll just welcome them as they, and if it's a small group, so, we have questions, there'll be some time and allowance for that certainly, but you might, if you want to put your question in the chat, or if we deal with it later, we'll just kind of see how things go. So my contact information is here. So if you have further questions, please feel free, to reach out, whether, it's just a general question on seals of biliteracy or something specific to this, to the global seal, which is the focus, but I work with both and have been, continue to try to play a supporting role where I can with states, especially on the implementation side. So we'll just kind of start with the premise of both the state seals as the global seal, and that's the concept of why do we want to certify language skills, and I'll talk a lot more about that. But these are the things that were identified really by students in a focus, several focus groups about what did they believe, as well as some of those teachers of those students in those classrooms. And one has consistently come to the top, which is it really does increase motivation, not just in taking a language, but in taking multiple years, continuing the sequences to upper levels. And then when you're in those classes, to actually do more than just do what's needed to pass the course. So instead of the students are asking not what do I need to do to pass the test, but what do I need to do to get to a particular ACTFL proficiency level, or how do I improve my speaking or my listening? They're really in my kind of experience early on, students were taking a language to meet a college entrance requirement. And so oftentimes that if that was an arbitrary 2 years or whatever the counselor told them, all they felt like they needed to do was to get by and pass the course. And so I had students, I remember one class where a boy received a D in a class, and he, on the semester exam, and he's like, yay, I passed. That was a D was something he celebrated because he met his goal, which was to get language on his high school transcript. And that's not so satisfying as a teacher to teach. And so what we've seen with the Seals of Biliteracy is that it changes the rationale for a student to be in the course. Now their goal is to achieve a Seal of Biliteracy as opposed to just passing a course. They see something more important as an outcome, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We see them wanting to highlight their bilingualism as a part of an application process, be that for employment or for scholarships or for college or university admission. We see they want an advanced placement. It's a way for universities to easily document a language skill in order to provide or a more appropriate university placement, but also potentially college credit. But what also is really interesting, and we'll see this in the data, is that students connect a Seal of Biliteracy more than a grade or a course outcome on their transcript with their future success. And so all of these things are really important to think about as you present a Seal of Biliteracy, be it your state seal or the global seal, or both, to your students and to your parents, and what is the benefit? Why do they want it? And we've seen in consistent data that adopting and implementing a Seal of Biliteracy program can really double your upper level division. So for those of you singletons, Rebecca and Colleen, that might, you might get a new teacher to help you out with some of those courses as you build that kind of a program. So this is something that was actually published in May of this year by Education Week. We see the article here. But this was a study done it talks about a large urban district in New Mexico, but it's referring to Albuquerque. And Albuquerque uses both the state seal as well as the global seal of biliteracy for their students. And what they've found is that they offer benchmark testing. In other words, they don't have to wait until the senior year to award a global seal. And so they will do that when the student earns it, with a goal of helping students to level up and continue in their sequences. And so they've seen about in over a course of 1 year, they had 11% of their students actually level up now from one ACTFL level to another. But what they also saw is that their Seal of Biliteracy recipients were more likely to enroll in college. They were doing better in courses. And so it's a great study to share, potentially even with administrators that are curious about, why do we do this? It's not just an extra award or a clapping applause moment, but it actually does impact student performance. But a lot of times we see, again, like the state situation with Albuquerque, they use both state seal and the global seal. They're similar. One test can oftentimes earn both, but they do have some differences. And so because I've been working since 2012 with the state seal movement and only since 2018 with the global seal, I'm pretty well versed on both, and I support both. State Seal of Biliteracy is incredibly important if it's an option to your program, because it's the first time government says that being bilingual is important. And so we want to continue that support. But they do differ. So for the first, all 50 states have some kind of a program. Some of the states are very independent. The student has to apply to just the state. It doesn't go through the school. They differ by name. In some states, they're called a Seal of Biliteracy. In some states, they're an endorsement, like they are, for example, in Texas. In my neighboring state of Indiana, it's called the Certificate of Multilingual Proficiency. So each state might call it something different, but essentially it's a recognition program for seniors in high school, typically when they graduate, although there are some states where they can earn it earlier. And it's a way to recognize some level of language proficiency. Now, there are multiple states where a test is required. That's the norm. But I believe there are 7 states where a student can earn their state seal of biliteracy through what's sometimes called seat time, maybe through a grade point average or certain courses that were taken. So in some cases, the state seal qualifies for high school credit, especially for our English language learners to support maybe a home language. And in some cases, it qualifies for university credit. In fact, I think there are now we're up to 5 states and working toward a 6th now that does that. So these are all, really exciting pieces. But each state you want to just understand is unique and it's different, has a different criteria, different tests that are approved, and so on. The global seal, similar to the state seals, has the same goal, sort of the same purpose. What's different is it is more of a universal certificate. So it's available to anyone, not just high school seniors, not just high school students, not just public school students. We certify university students, we certify working adults, and even middle school students. About 4% of our certificates last year in 2023 went to middle school students. We do have 3 certificate levels. So there's a stackable element to the global seal, and the universal criteria is the same around the world. So we do it only through testing. There is no seat time or grade point average, but we do have college credit pathways and some other things that I'll share with you that hopefully will kind of clarify some of the differences. So the goal of a certificate, whether it's the state seal or the global seal, is to equip students with skills that are documented. This is a picture that was taken. I took this summer at the Department of Education's Seal of Biliteracy Summit that was held in DC. I think Crystal was there. That was to celebrate all 50 states now had some state seal program. And so this is a student who actually, she was serving this summer as an intern at the Department of Education, and she earned a Missouri state seal from her high school. She also earned a global seal because her school, like many schools, have chosen to use both programs as a way to complement as well as to enhance student opportunities. And so she was actually a recipient of both, and she was the individual who actually introduced Secretary Cardona. Also at that event was another global seal recipient whose name was Miguel Cabrera, and he is an older man, not a young, teenager, and he is studying to become a Spanish teacher, but is an immigrant from Mexico, was in the military, and went back to university on the GI Bill and studied at San Diego State University, which is one of the university programs that uses the global seal. So he shared that with a lot of pride at that event. So the goal really is to document skills, because when we document skills, then we we're empowering our language learners to more easily share with others what they have. Just an anecdote, one of my students said that he'd earned, he'd gotten a 4 on the advanced placement test, and his boss said, that's nice. And then he said, well, it's going to qualify me for the Illinois State Seal of Biliteracy. And his boss said, wow, you must be really good at languages. There's something about the word certificate or credential that holds more weight. And so what we want to think about is, how do we use these sort of levels of certificates as a gamification pathway toward proficiency? And my goal always has been, how do we extend language learning sequences, which is why, I was excited when I read about the Seal of Biliteracy way back in 2012, and I was an advocate for it here in Illinois. We passed it here in Illinois in 2013. I had the opportunity to testify downstate on its behalf, and my school was the first pilot district. And it really works. It really does engage students and excite them about achieving. And so what I've done here is sort of stacked the state seal of biliteracy that you have in Nebraska. You have two programs. You have both the silver or the that first level, which is basically at an intermediate mid-level. And then you also have your intermediate high or your gold certificate. So the Global Seal does something similar, but we do have 3 levels. We also start at what we refer to as functional fluency. And we use those terms because that's what the think about it as comprehensible input to the rest of the people that don't know the actual scale. So functional, they can get by, won't be pretty, but they could survive a situation. Then we have our working fluency at advanced low and our professional fluency at advanced high. And so you could see that a student, depending upon whether the assessment aligns with the Global Seal, that a student who qualifies for the Nebraska Silver Seal of Biliteracy could also qualify for our first level of Global Seal. Then let's say they continue, especially if you do that, maybe typically we see that either at the end of a middle school program, if they're in a dual language immersion situation, or we see it as soon as the end of sophomore year for students who begin as freshmen or 8th graders in high school. And so then let's say they're at that gives them a goal to work toward intermediate high. And one of the nice things about having these graduated levels is that a student can be recognized more accurately at where they are. So for example, the student who might earn a 5 on an advanced placement test is above that intermediate high level, but their documentation might not reflect it. And so what we see is that you can incentivize, gamify language learning when students have an idea of what they have to do, especially if you provide some formative feedback so they know what the next steps are, can-do statements or descriptors or a test that provides that. So lots of reasons why a school might choose to use the Global Seal. So one is that they as a school might not qualify for a state seal. This might be true if the state seal is only for seniors, if they're only if they're in a private school as opposed to a public school, or in the case of this student, they're at a university student and they didn't have that opportunity in high school. Another reason is that the language has no approved test for a state seal. There are some states that have very limited numbers of approved tests, and they don't cover every language. The Global Seal is available in over 100, we're close to 150 languages now. And so sometimes that's the reason, because we have an approved test for a language that they might not be able to have. A third reason is that the student could score above or below a state seal level. Now, in your situation, you have an intermediate mid option, and that's important. So example, if I'm starting Chinese or Japanese as a freshman in high school, I might not get to the same level as a student who, of proficiency as a student who maybe is studying Spanish, for example. In Illinois, our state is at intermediate high, and so a lot of our Chinese or Arabic learners might not qualify. Or because they're above the level, maybe they're at that advanced low and working fluency level, and they want to be recognized for that higher level. A fourth reason is that students want to document their skills before senior year. A lot of times state seals are earned with an advanced placement test. Well, if we wait till the advanced placement test and we take it as a senior, we get the scores back in July, and we've already been either accepted or rejected by a university. And so when the certificate or the award comes at graduation, it doesn't always give the student a chance to use their bilingualism as a way to differentiate themselves on scholarship applications or university applications. And so if they have language skills, we encourage them to, certify as soon as they have them, and we can continue to gamify the ongoing learning, but it's one option. And so that's one of the ways that we see the Global Seal used. They want something that is digitally shareable. Typically the state seal is a certificate. In some cases, it just goes on a transcript and they don't even, in some cases, they don't even know that they've earned it because they've just qualified maybe by courses or by a test that they've taken. And so we've really tried to think of ways to help students leverage and articulate their skills. And one of those things is by doing something that's digitally shareable. And then obviously the last reason here, the number 6, is they want to be able to distinguish themselves with early applications, again, because of timing, the Common App, and so on. Teachers are also qualified to earn a global seal, and so that's obviously not an opportunity for them to earn their state seal. But the global seal is increasingly being used by districts to either provide recognition to their teachers, using it sometimes for hiring as a way to screen an individual for their language skills. We have a number of states that are starting to look at using the global seal for teacher certification. My state of Illinois has been doing that now for 4 years. And so we really encourage teachers. Sometimes when I got my certification, there wasn't even a test involved. So that was an experience for me. And sometimes as a teacher, we maybe could gain insight by taking the same kinds of exams that students have to take in terms of how best to prepare them. And, oftentimes if we're teaching, especially if we're teaching lower levels, our own level of language, maybe academic writing, for example, is diminished. So I invite all of you to consider getting Global Seal certified yourself. And I'll share some of the things that you can do with that certification. So the Global Seal has those 3 levels: functional fluency, working fluency, and professional fluency. It will list the ACTFL level, or if you've taken a test that's a CEFR, or Common European Framework of Reference. So like we'll see that especially with our international awardees. And the program is completely free. So if you're already providing a test to students, you could just give them one more benefit to taking that test and doing well. So similar to the state seal programs, there's no charge other than the cost of testing, which you arrange and handle directly with whatever test provider or company you've chosen to use. You'll notice that each global seal has a serial number, and that's really, really important because that's how it becomes digitally shareable. And I'll talk a little bit about what we do with that. The global seal has been issued since 2022 in all 50 U.S. states, but we are currently, and those are our top 5 states from 2023, but we are also currently now in 59 countries and counting. And so that gives us some really cool opportunities to connect students with universities in the countries where that language is spoken, as well as work with international teachers and so on. So that's piece. This gives you kind of a 1-year view of who, in terms of what levels earned. Primarily, our largest group is still high school students, but our largest growth last year was in our adult market. So it had been about 3% the year before, and it was almost doubled last year. And so we see, again, that because we're measuring just language proficiency, you can, any age that can demonstrate that level of skill can qualify. A single test, as I mentioned, could qualify them for both a state seal as well as a global seal. We have 12 different ACTFL scale tests that have been approved by our International Board of Advisors. We also have 36 different CEFR scale tests. Now, what's unusual about the CEFR tests, or at least different, is that they're typically our single language tests, whereas many of the test providers that are providing tests on the ACTFL scale are represent multiple languages. So I think, STAMP maybe has 45 languages. The AP tests have, I guess, 8 now. And so it's a little bit different. And so, but if we look at those from, just again, what are sort of our top tests for 2023, these were our top tests in terms of tests used to certify with the global seal. So the STAMP 4S test was number 1, our AP language tests were number 2, and especially in our international markets, the IELTS test was number 3. But you'll see that there's some other tests here that were also, that were certainly used. of those, but those were the top ones. One of the things, whether you use the state seal or a global seal or both, is to kind of think about it not as a trophy or as an award, but really as a tool for students to articulate their level of language. And those are the things that we continue to try to think about, is how can we help students level up to get to a higher level of certificate? How can we help them leverage their skills, like document it in a way that means something to their next steps? And then how can we help them find their next steps and link them to universities or to, for scholarships or to employers? And so one of the things, and this was actually brought out in Secretary Cardona's speech at that summit, was that what makes a certificate really useful. And some of the things that we know is that they should be verifiable. And one of the things I've been having, one of my little fun hobbies lately is to find tests, sort of studies by companies, because companies, I think about like being Google certified or continually interested in micro-credentials. But part of that is because language skills are typically self-identified, like on LinkedIn or Indeed. And so I've been collecting studies where that's not been really verifiable or actually accurate. So in this one, this is a study by Career Builder that they found, 56% of people lied on their sort of application. So not good. In another study, also with 2,000 hiring managers, they found that the thing that they most oftentimes lied about, or the second most common thing in this particular study, was foreign language skills. And then this study by Babbel in UK that was conducted with LinkedIn, they found that out of 1,000, that the most common thing that they exaggerated or lied about or were not quite honest about on their CV was language. And interestingly, this one was more oftentimes men than women. So employers are saying we want skills that are verifiable. So that's one of the things on the global seal. A certificate number a serial number can be entered, and we can verify it immediately for the employer or the university. They also want evidence of skills. And so that's the difference between a grade or as a certification, is it comes with that concept of tested and proven. And so it gives people a way to actually provide evidence of their skill set. But for employers, that makes it comparable, so they can compare two candidates, and that's really helpful. So these are the things that we look at in terms of what are good credentials. They should be verifiable. We talked about that. The user wants them to be easily shared. Like, how do I get this information out? How do I share it? And they can share Global Seal digitally. And they want it to be stackable. In other words, that idea of motivation and gamification is really important. And that it can then be, and we found in lots of studies that actually improves in retention, but also can incentivize enrollment when there are certificates available. And so these are all things that we've really tried to achieve, is to give not just high school students with that sort of articulation into university language programs, but also our university students into the workforce. And my sort of personal dream is when everyone values language, then we'll have so many students in our classes, we won't be able to find all the teachers. So that's another project we're working on, is how do we connect teachers to language teacher programs. So this is that certificate and what that looks like, a little bit closer view of it, and that serial number and what we do with it. So one of the things you can do with a Global Seal serial number is add your certificate to LinkedIn, as well as some of the other platforms as well. So on LinkedIn, there is a section called Licenses and Certifications. So on the left was a student that actually is now working at Johns Hopkins, but that student actually had a Global Seal in both Mandarin and in Spanish. She was a heritage speaker of Mandarin and learned Spanish in school. And on the right is a French teacher from Maryland. And again, you see it goes right above her Maryland teaching certificate. So we want them to be easily shared, but we also want them to have value. And so this is one of those tools. Another tool that we have is what we call our language profile. So a student can actually share their certificate digitally along with a narrative that could list courses, that could talk about a study abroad program, or a trip they took, or a volunteer project, or their home life and how they use language at home, or with family or friends. And it's really an open space for them to do that. And so this is kind of what that process looks like. So when a student or an adult or anyone gets their Global Seal by Literacy, they can sign up using that serial number. And basically what we call it is to activate their Global Seal so it can be now digitally shared. Then they create their sort of language journey. So they can add whatever information they want about themselves. They can add that text, that narrative. And when they enter that piece in, they can add a photo if they want. Then it will generate an actual facsimile, a digital facsimile of their certificate alongside of, if you look at that third picture, alongside of a description of what someone can do at that level in workplace language. It also gives you, if in the top right, they have an opportunity to share that profile digitally. They can do it with a URL. They can copy and paste that URL to send it into somewhere into a link. They can also, do it to share it with social media. So there's some options in terms of what they're able to do with that activation point. And then if they share it, this is sort of what that begins to look like. So they will be able to, if they have one certificate, that's what it shows. They can add as much as they like. This happens to be a recipient from one of our universities in India that's using the Global Seal, and what his certificate looks like. And you can see that it'll describe what he's able to do at that level. We also have a digital certificate option. So, for example, if schools are using an AP program and the students have already left the building, so to speak, because scores come back in July, their serial number certificate can be sent to them digitally, so they can open it up and activate it wherever they may have gone. We also have created higher education pathways. So we're working with lots of universities to create a pathway. So rather than thinking about AP numbers, AP tests where there might only be 6 hours or 8 hours, what we're asking universities for is actual competency-based credit. In other words, what would you give someone who had, what courses would someone have finished to reach this level of language fluency? So typically, if someone is at a 3 or a 4 on an AP test, or they're at that intermediate mid or intermediate high space, that's typically looking at that, at end of the second semester of second year or first semester of third year courses. And so if we think about that, that's typically 14 to 16 hours. And so that's what we're looking at with our universities, is where would you actually place them? And if they complete that first course, then with, you have an easy way to place them. You don't have to give them an additional placement test. They come with one with their seal, and then provide them with the credit that came before. And this is actually working. So for example, the University of Texas at Arlington, universities right now want students. They need students. There is what they call an enrollment cliff, because with the birth rate, the demographic of available freshmen has gone down and will continue to go down next year in 2025. So they're looking for ways to attract students, and this is one way to do it. So the University of Arlington, if they have a Global Seal, they can earn a language minor in 1 year by starting with the next course in the sequence, and they earn 14 hours of university credit. That's across different languages. We have other universities. University of Alabama is 13 hours. I think the University of Idaho is 16 hours. And so this is really a cool tool that we're able to sort of provide, and we're continuing to grow these. And for example, at the University of Texas, Arlington, they only charge the students a $25 processing fee to do that, to kind of get it onto their transcript. So this is something, again, the idea of leveraging and linking them to opportunities. Before I guess I should do this, one other piece that we see the Global Seal used differently, but could also be enhanced by a state seal, is on the Common app, which a lot of high school students will use to apply to college. So on the Common app, the language portion, they can identify their languages. There's like 5 different ways to highlight language skills there. So one of the ways is just in their profile where they can identify what languages they speak. But they also can identify, do they read in that language, just listen, write, is it a home language? They can also talk about, a language experience and the essay if they want. But typically we see them add it to the honors area. So on the honors area, they can list up to 5 honors. Then they list what kind of honor. Was it a school honor or a district honor? Was it a state honor? Was it a national honor? Or was it an international honor? And the Global Seal would count as an international honor. So a process is very simple. We try to keep it simple, make it easy, and it's about to get even simpler soon. We're working on a platform that will make it even easier. But there is an online application, and basically this is letting us know your intent to submit scores. And this, it takes about 5 minutes. An administrator is not needed, just a couple of contact people. So should we have a question? And then we send information on how to submit scores. So that comes by automatic reply. Then when you have your test scores in hand, it can be whatever the test that qualified that you've chosen to use. When you have those test scores, you submit the scores to us. So we actually archive the test score to connect it directly to that serial number so that we can validate to our universities as well as to our employers that yes, in fact, we have that. And we only take test scores directly from either the school or the organization that administers the test or from the testing company itself. So we do not take scores from candidates, and that's to protect the integrity of the program. And then we send free of charge, including shipping, those certificates with the embossed seal and that serial number. So it's the process, if it's not in the middle of May, is usually about only like 7 days. But in May, it can get to as many as 14, 20 days, or some 20 days, depending on how many. I think we processed over 5,000 this last May. So it gets very busy, and we have a small team, but we try to get them quickly to the students. So we have a tutorial on our website under that apply button that kind of explains the process. So essentially what you would complete is a candidate sheet listing how the student's name should appear on the certificate, and we automate as much as we can. And so this is one of those pieces that whatever you put there as that student's name, that's what's going to go onto the certificate. And so we always say, be careful, that you've got it correct. Because we do, while we don't charge for the originals, we do charge for a reprint if a correction needs to be made. But this will automatically feed our certificate process once the scores have been verified. So lastly, just want to say it's always important to celebrate student success. That's, a big piece of it. And when you celebrate the success, you're setting, especially this is sometimes a downside of the seal at, it's at the end of high school, they've already maybe graduated or they're graduating. You don't have time to sort of make the big buzz to incentivize the younger learners. So if you don't have a celebration, think about how to incorporate one, even if they're a candidate for the seal because you haven't gotten the scores back, but they took the test. Because this sets the expectation for students that are coming up from the younger grades to be able to also achieve. And so again, you can see we have, a wide variety of ages here. So, and that kind of takes me to my little mantra, which is always celebrate what you want to duplicate. And there's lots of ways you can celebrate, be it program, awarding certificates on stage, if they've earned college credit, give them one of those big giant good housekeeping checks with the value of the college credit that was earned because of your language program. Certainly cake and punch or cookies is nice. This is a school on the lower right that does sort of a board with the names of all the students who have achieved it from year to year, and that's posted in their hallway. So there's lots of things that you can do but raising the visibility, doing We provide a press release so you can, and posters that you can use to sort of promote your program. That all really, really does help, whether it's a state seal or a global seal or both, celebrate what you want to duplicate. So with that, I'm going to sort of stop this and we'll just, if you have questions, I'd like to take them and see if there's anything I could answer for you. Anything that maybe wasn't there that you're like, oh, I wanted to know about X. I'm here for that for you.
Any questions? Yeah, I do have a question. When students apply, how was their results sent to, Global Seal test results?
So we have two application processes. So the most common one that's used is the group process, in which the school would apply on behalf of the student or a group of students, and then the school will send us the test scores.
Okay.
So we have very intense like student security. We only take the only thing we're taking is actually what information is needed to go on that actual certificate. If we do have an individual application, but the student, if they've taken their test with a school, we'll send them back to the school for submission. But if we have a student, for example, that's taken a test on their own, or potentially we see a student who maybe did a study abroad program or something like that, where they've taken a test, then we actually get the test scores directly from the test company. So we have an API or a computer sort of setup where some of our test companies will submit scores to us more automatically, but others, will have, like, they'll send them, for example, College Board AP, they send the scores to us. But we don't take, for integrity, to make sure we can trust the scores, we don't take them directly from students or from any individual. It's either the testing company, or it's the school or their employer or the organization or the testing center where they took a test.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But like homeschoolers, sometimes they do the test on their own if they don't, aren't in a school program or something like that.
Rebecca, Colleen, and Gwen, Mel, do you have any questions?
Gwen had a question in the chat. Do teachers have to take a proficiency test in both English and Spanish? So whether it's a teacher or anyone else, we identify what we refer to, since it's a seal of biliteracy, we identify what we refer to as the first language of certification and the second language of certification. The second language of certification, it must be earned with a test. The first language of certification, which we describe as the language in which you are most comfortable speaking, listening, reading, and writing. In other words, the sort of dominant language. For most individuals, that's the language of education. So it might not, so that idea of first language, it's not necessarily a first language. It typically is the first language of education. So we refer to it as the first language of certification. And that is based on our 3 levels and the research we've done. So if an individual has finished they're in 8th grade, they finished 7th grade, they're now in 8th grade, we accept the fact that they are likely at the intermediate mid-level. In fact, we pretty much know they're at the intermediate mid-level in that first language of certification, or their dominant language. So if we think about what that means, someone could write strings of sentences that aren't necessarily in an organized paragraph, and there will be errors. And that's typically what someone's able to do at the end of 6th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. So we say if they are in 8th grade, they they and are meeting their school requirements to be in 8th grade, that they've met qualifications for our functional fluency. So anyone above 8th grade, there's no test required as long as that criteria is met. For our working fluency, which is our advanced low space, that means some, paragraph length discourse, that is 11th grade. And for our professional fluency, it's a university degree. However, if someone doesn't meet that threshold of education, they can opt to take a test and still earn the global seal. So we see that with some of our dual language immersion programs that are testing students in 6th and 7th grade. And as I mentioned there, we saw that 4%. We actually see some of those students in dual language immersion programs testing at intermediate, high, and even advanced low. So it is possible. But so the first language could be a level of education, but it can also be a test. The second language must be a test. So thanks for great question.
Any other questions? You can just unmute.
Thank
And
you,
there are only
Rebecca.
6 of us.
Will
So-
the presentation that you have be shared somewhere? Crystal, I need to maybe go back and look at your email.
Linda, is that okay to share your presentation? I have asked Linda's permission. We also recorded it, so I think
Oh,
it's fine.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay. What about we turn on the camera and we take a picture together if we don't have any questions?
Don't like having my picture taken.
Yay. Clean? Is it okay?
I don't like having my picture taken.
Okay. And then we will take your beautiful picture from your
art.
student. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to do it. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Mel, do you have any questions at all? Any thoughts?
You're muted.
I am muted. No, not at the moment. I feel like I need to go back and look. I've got, Kate and Crystal and I just met the other day about the state seal of biliteracy. So I've got a lot swimming around in my head kind of about both.
Yeah. Well, and I think for the student perspective, if they get 2 awards, they really think they're great at something and they continue. So that's, we've seen that also. But again, because it can be awarded earlier, especially if there's benchmark testing. That's when we did the study for the foreign language annals, and we interviewed a number of students. Some students had already exited the program and didn't know about it. That was the biggest complaint, that they felt like some of them had only heard about it their senior year. And so they didn't feel like they might have made different decisions, both about the attention they paid in class, as well as whether or not they continue to take language classes. And so one of the things that's really helpful is some sort of a benchmark test along the way. So they get some formative feedback about their progress to know if they're on target or not. That's also really helpful if you have English language learners that you're trying to certify in a home language, because that gives them feedback and the parents some, I guess, instruction in a way of where they might need to practice. Maybe they need to, write letters to family back in the home country, or, read or access articles or different kinds of things. So that was that's really can be, successful programs tend to give kids a heads up if they're waiting instead of waiting until the senior year when it's too late. Then it becomes just a pass-fail experience instead of something really exciting that I'm working toward. So that might, and it doesn't have to necessarily even be a formal, assessment, but certainly external tests give some great feedback. And they break it up by skill. So it can really inform the curriculum in your own program as well when you do that. Some schools just do a sampling, random students, and they don't test them all, but they get a sampling of where their programs might be at. And that can even help set proficiency targets for the end of each particular course or something like that, which is also kind of a cool, it's happening more and more. We see districts that are choosing to do that. So, but if you have questions as things that come up, please feel free to reach out to us. One thing I didn't mention, we only take test scores up to 12 months old. But sometimes schools have test scores from a previous year, like they would still be good until, if they were taken anytime, I guess, post August of last year. We're getting almost to the end of the month here. So, and again, we can send students scores digitally if they're no longer in the building, although you can always send parents to pick them up at the office. A lot of schools do that over the summer as well. So there's lots of options. We also, as you're working with, whether it's a state or global seal, we also have free self-assessments. They're little mini quizzes that use emojis to say, and they're based on can-do statements by level. And so the students can take that and they'll get a little feedback, like if you've, answered honestly, you're likely to be, whatever, intermediate mid. It's computer adaptive. So it adjusts, and they just basically say, I can't do it. I can do it with help. I can do it really well. And it adjusts based on their answers. And it's pretty accurate. There's 6 little mini tests, so they cover all 4 skills and the 3 communicative modes: interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive. And they get like a little score, kind of thermometer score report. And there's some reflection statements that are also available with that. So, sometimes it's good for students to get an idea where they might be. A lot of times students hesitate to take a test because they don't think they're going to qualify, and they might be surprised they actually would. Thank you, Crystal. And those are available both on ACTFL as well as CEFR scales, because we do work a lot with those as well.
Thank you. I've posted your self-assessment in the chat.
Thank you. Anything else? Colleen, do you have any other ideas or questions, thoughts?
Oh, no. Okay. I think we still have time, need some time to process and think about it.
Yes,
If,
for sure.
yeah. If we have more questions, I will reach to you again,
Please
Linda.
do. Yeah, thanks. And like I said, there's something that teachers are doing as well. So,
Yeah.
Gives you something you can, some bragging rights or something. So thank you so much, Crystal, for inviting me to share. Happy to
Thank
help.
you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you all.
Thank
Have
you
a
for the
great
information.
school year. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, have a great
Thank
school year.
you.
I'm a little
Thank
envious. I miss the classroom.
Me too. I miss the classroom as well,
Yep,
Yeah.
me too.
Thank you, Linda. I
All
appreciate
right. Thank
your
you all.
spending the
Bye-bye.
time explaining it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.